Hello, folks.
Good afternoon. We're just all assembling. Let's see, got a couple more people to pull in.
My Zoom says Zoom is unable to detect a camera.
Uh-oh.
I know. Hold on.
Plug-ins on my phone. For my,
Seem to have, oh, there we go. More person. Okay.
plug-in.
There we go.
There we go.
The old unplug and replug. Who knows
It's like
why?
old times. It's like old times. We are not in practice session. I'll let you know that things have already started recording because of the way that we initiated this meeting. And I appreciate that everybody was able to pivot. We were scheduled to be at our second planning board meeting today in the auditorium, and it is sweltering in there. So rather than have folks try to run between one and the other, both meetings have been created as remote. So Jane, if you would take the role of the chair. This is a full planning board, as we have more than 3 members. And so any motions or votes will require roll call like the old days.
Okay, so I will call this meeting of the planning board to order. It's actually a meeting of the subcommittee, but we had some extra planning board members, so we noticed it as a planning board meeting. We have planning board member Steve Yost, Sean Henry. I'm Jane Remsen, the vice chair of the planning board and the chair of this housing subcommittee. We have David Rosen and Beverly Bookin and our staff planner, our planning director, Greg Catamatori. And we have Alex Koppelman, community development director, and Eric Hinderly, our staff planner. And I can't find my agenda, but
I can place it up for you.
hold on. Oh yeah, here we go.
You got it.
Yeah, so the main purpose of today's meeting is to review the Gloucester zoning ordinance, section 5.11, inclusionary housing requirements. But before we start that, I'm just going to give a little overview of where we are on our other topics. We successfully recommended to the planning board that we repeal the village development overlay district, and we have a draft for that, and that's going to come to the planning board's next meeting. And the OSRD cluster, we'll take it up at our next meeting on 7/24 if we have time. Trees, we haven't forgotten about trees. We're waiting on tree data. And we also need to address the ADU ordinance, which there's a new state ADU ordinance, and our local ADU ordinance is not exactly in alignment with the state. So, but I thought, and you let me know if you disagree, that we would focus on the inclusionary and the OSRD cluster to try to get those to city council before the end of the year, and then pick up the ADU after the first of the year. Does that sound reasonable to everybody and doable?
It
Kind of a
sounds reasonable.
Kind of a push.
It
So
sounds
I'll
reasonable.
provide a little comment. We will, so unfortunately, and I can totally understand this now. I know Suzanne Egan is going to be heading out on vacation next week. So she had kind of a bunch of stuff kind of pop up, what could possibly be going on these days, like filing a complaint against your trash contractor. So she's not going to be able to attend this afternoon. So there's some discussion related to the inclusionary ordinance that will hold until she's available. The ADU, we're kind of monitoring fairly closely, and that may be something that kind of bubbles up and enters into one of these discussions sooner than later. It is kind of interesting just today, I think there's already been some discussion at the state level of some modifications to the CMR that is responsible for the administering of the as of right ADU under the state's ordinance. So it's going to take some doing. I'm not sure. It may be something that advances on its own timeline, whether it needs to kind of be moved up because of inconsistencies that the zoning board is dealing with. But we'll just kind of park that. Otherwise, I think that's consistent with your timeline. And we can kind of have this inclusionary discussion that'll take a couple of meetings, and then we can get back to the cluster and OSRD.
Great. Sounds good. And David, congratulations on your grandchild.
Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate those nice comments. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. On the ADU, and maybe we had this for one of the last meetings, I can't remember.
Nope, we just lost David.
Yeah.
Take
You're back.
Gloucester's. Alright.
You froze, David. We didn't hear you.
Okay, would it be possible to take the Gloucester ordinance and the state ordinance and compare them as we did with some other stuff recently? On a sheet, maybe Jane does her magic of, throwing it into AI, and so that we can see the differences. I did hear there's a new AD unit that's being built in Rockport, right on Granite Street. Interesting, and that Rockport just adopted the state's.
They had a model.
Yeah, they just
Yeah.
used the state's model, and I think we clearly want to have one ordinance, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, I think in advance of that discussion, it makes a lot of sense to highlight the differences between the two.
Yes.
Because there are, if you were to just adopt the state ordinance, it may not actually allow for some of the flexibility that ours currently has. So it's a little bit of a push and pull. There's some things that are, well, I think we did it very well. I think we have one that functions very well, and they have some additional parameters that are in there that conflict with what we do. There are some things related to parking requirements. There are some things related to height. So I don't know that it would be a wholesale, we just want to do it the way the state's doing it. So that's the challenge, is how do we come up with an ordinance that would probably, kind of break them apart and reference, if you're going this route, here are all your requirements. If you're going this route, here's your requirements. So
Let's see those side by side.
yeah,
I'll get to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is just a little backburn unless something comes up that we need to do. It's a lower priority than these other two. So
Is there a timeline, Greg, that we have to meet for the state for adopting?
there
this?
is no timeline. The state, when they enacted it, and also just prior to, to the establishment of their code of Massachusetts regulations that governs it, they basically said, look, this is something that your building commissioners have to know, because if somebody comes and meets all the requirements of the state, they just go through the building permit process. So you don't have to do anything. There are some communities that don't even have an ADU ordinance, and they can just operate under the CMR. What it does do is, if you do adopt an ordinance, like if you've never had one, it creates something that's a little bit clearer to both the public, the applicant, the building commissioner that's administering it. Here's what those requirements are going to be. So yeah, it's complicated. So I would definitely also appreciate, Suzanne's time on that as well. Because again, a number of communities are dealing a little bit with this struggle, but basically if you meet those state requirements, you go straight to the building inspector.
yes, Beverly.
Having worked on that subcommittee to put it together, I think Sean was on the committees too. You may have been, I can't remember her name. It seems to me that with Greg already kind of working at that, first of all, we don't want an ADU ordinance that is not in compliance with state law, because then we run the risk of losing potential ADUs that we would want to encourage. But secondly, if it isn't that complicated to compare them and to see where we might give and so on, it might be a side project that isn't going to take us.
Take a lot of time.
Yeah, and it's not going to take us away from take our eye off the main ball, but it would be kind of silly if it can be fixed in the short term or some, and it sounds more complicated than just coming into compliance. And
And my understanding is we're not out of compliance and it's not in conflict with the state law. You can use ours or you can use the state's.
Yeah,
That's
so
how.
so basically under the state, there are parameters that you can pursue by right. Our ordinance provides options for uses of structures like above a garage. You know, there's some allowance for that to pursue a special permit process where the state doesn't have any allowance for that. So it is a little bit of, if there's a way that we can incorporate that to just define, you know, what it means to be a state permitted ADU, and somebody wants to go that route, I don't think we would want to lose what we've already established in our ordinance. So again, you know, it's a little bizarre the way that they rolled this out. They said, you don't have to do anything. You know, if you're a community that doesn't have any regulations right now, you could adopt regulations or not. But so that's like kind of the little bit of a difference with that one is they put it in 40A, but then they adopted a whole suite of regulations in the Massachusetts code that basically says exactly, it's almost like that is the ordinance, so to speak. If you want to do it, you follow these state rules. Locally, you have to give them a permit if they satisfy all those. So
and if they're changing the CMR, let's give it a little time.
right, and then
you know,
now that they're probably seeing some growing pains of having a little outreach with the communities before they enacted it to figure out what the issues are with the way it's been established.
But if I might say, one of the advantages of pulling down that requirement into our code is it's a matter of transparency with our citizens, because they rely on the code to tell them about an ADU. And the issue is, if there's then this state route they can go without going, straight to go, we should have it incorporated into our ordinance. And the issue is, how complicated is that? How much time does this subcommittee have to work on it? But it seems
again,
to me,
I think involving the solicitor will just come to you with a draft that says this is what we need to do. Yeah,
I like that.
Yep.
Anybody else have anything to say on that topic or on the topic of our priorities? Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
In terms of the ADU ordinance, my read of the model state ADU ordinance was that we're sort of anticipating some communities having two ordinances for ADUs, because they specifically say in that state ordinance that it's a state ADU, leaving the opportunity open to have a local ADU
Right.
follows a different set of parameters. So it's almost like they would be fine if we left our ADU ordinance intact with the extra allowances we have, as well as adopting their requirements in a separate ordinance that, to Beverly's point, could be spelled out specifically what they would do under the state guidelines.
Yep.
But to our other priorities, in preparing for tonight's other meeting, reading through the comprehensive plan and the action plan for the comprehensive plan, et cetera, there seems to be a number of items that are would be fairly easy to approach and to change, that are specific targets, were specifically targeted in the comprehensive plan. Dimensional that was actually before this meeting, I was recording the last subcommittee meeting that I missed, and I know I think Jane and David had a meeting with the ZBA talking about some of the things that they would like to see changed to get stuff off their plate. And I think specifically came up When R80 was created, it put a lot of lots into non-compliance. So those folks, anytime they're doing something to their home, have to come through. And I think we recognized when we were doing the 3A exercise that that's very much the case downtown in the R5 district. And I think it's pretty much the case, given our history of essentially doubling lot sizes a couple decades back when folks were scared about overdevelopment with the new sewer going in, that we have a lot of noncompliance throughout the city. And that's one of the things that the comprehensive plan spoke to, of taking a look at those, doing an audit of existing conditions within those zoning districts and trying to adjust our zoning accordingly to not impose an inordinate amount of red tape on those existing units, and to actually reflect in future development what exists on the ground now. So that seems like dimensional requirements rather than this actual zoning change seems like would be a relatively quick task that we could accomplish, if that's something that we could.
It might be quick, but I think it would take some education and
Definitely research, yeah.
and research, right? And I think we're waiting for that photogrammetric data stuff that Greg's
Greg.
office is producing, right?
So let's think about and it may be, so just for clarity's sake, if you wanted to continue to meet regularly on Thursdays, whatever that might mean for the balance of this month, I don't think we'll have a fully fleshed modification of the inclusionary ordinance until the solicitor's office is involved and back. And that's probably not going to be until at this point the first week in August. So just thinking about timing and agendas, boy, we're really doing this meeting a little bit backward.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is totally fine.
Yeah.
Because our discussion might be a little bit abbreviated because they're not able to be here today. But if it makes sense and you want to kind of dive into data, we will have that available if you wanted to take a look at it for either the 24th or the 31st, just about like the existing conditions, what we're dealing with. It's a lot. There's a lot of information, and it could involve a number of different changes, depending upon, again, what the goal is, and how extensive, because there's kind of for every dimension, there's a tolerance of like how much nonconformity is it? Is it a foot? Is it 2 feet? Is it 3 feet? For whatever that all is. But I will have that summarized for people to start taking a hard look at. Again, I think there's a lot to it. I mean, you can break it down by district and think about, what you might want to do in each individual district to try to alleviate, in some ways this will assist the zoning board as long as everybody in the room says, yeah, if there was another 1 foot available to folks, it would eliminate 30 applications each year to the zoning board. And can you live with that? So I think it almost does a reverse, it's kind of like an autopsy of what happened in 99 and shows you exactly what happened in every district. And, we only generally create compliant lots at this point. So there's obviously more lots than back then, but the amount of nonconformity was kind of instant overnight when those went in place. And there's patterns too of by district. So there might be one or more, more that have more that you would want to focus on because actually would make a big difference than others. So maybe that's something we could talk about either on the 24th or the 31st, because we might have a little bit of a not lieu. I'll talk about a lieu payment in a short bit. Yeah.
Keep going. No, go ahead. Finish.
So we might have a lull on inclusionary for a couple of meetings.
Okay. The thing is, I feel like we're getting like into ADHD mode here.
Yep.
I want to make sure that we continue to keep, to put the OSRD cluster thing. We've got a good discussion going, and I just want to finish that. So and also Sean, I'm sort of thinking about this, like, you know, before December and after December, because we've got one city council and mayor now, and we're gonna have a potentially different city council and potentially a new mayor. Or not, maybe, but after December. And so if it's something we can fully get done before December, it's worth starting now and trying to get it done. If we can't get it done before December, we might as well wait so that the whole new city council is, you know, is brought up to speed. And I'm just not sure we can get the dimensional requirement stuff done.
Well, I don't think we can get them done necessarily in the outlying areas if we're actually going to be resizing lots. But I think to the point of the comprehensive plan where it was talking about specifically downtown and repurposing historic buildings in the central district, that again, one big impediment that we've, for reasons unknown, written into our current ordinance is the increasing setback requirements, even on Main Street. when we
Mhm.
add
Yeah,
residential.
I
And
know.
I think that would be something you just delete. Again,
Mhm.
most, whether it's the new council or the old council, they would see, and mayor, new mayor, current mayor, would see the logic in saying that you don't want 20-foot setbacks on Main Street or Roger Street
Mhm.
or Maplewood Avenue for that matter. So doing something like that, removing those residential requirements for setbacks in central business area, neighborhood business areas, that kind of thing, I think should be a fairly simple lift and an easy to explain concept that we,
Okay.
and it's just not changing anything. It's just deleting.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. All right, then,
Well, maybe a good approach is we'll have at this point, brief discussion about some of the things associated with the inclusionary ordinance. If you want to pick up OSRD cluster discussion maybe for a couple of meetings, and then I can show you all the data
okay,
and maybe what comes out of it is there's a lot in here. There's a lot of different changes that can potentially be made. They all have to be justified in terms of, why are we doing this? What will the, potential impact of it be? But you'll also, it was definitely focused on the residential districts. So that separate discussion, again, we can dedicate a meeting to just that little bit about those other dimensions. And if you think that's something that you want to advance and doable, and the education around it is doable, and you think there'll be support for it, then that's something that could come out of a meeting in a month.
okay. Is everybody here, or at least Beverly and Sean are my main characters, willing to meet every Thursday
Yes.
I'll be gone in August.
for the whole month?
No, from the 13th to the 20th. So,
okay.
I'm gonna be in the other Portland.
The
It
other
won't be convenient for me to
Yeah,
come
sure.
by Zoom because it's 3 hours earlier and I'm not available.
How
So
about you,
yeah,
Sean?
that might be 2
Portland.
Thursdays. That might be 2 Thursdays. So
Okay. And
Okay.
what about you, Sean?
I'm good.
And then David, can you
Yeah.
step in for Beverly? Yep.
I
And
can.
Steve, you're
Yeah.
welcome to step in for anyone can't come.
Except for next week. Except for next
Okay.
week.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds like a plan. We'll just keep pushing.
I
Forward.
think what I'll do is the graphic that I gave to you in the beginning of the year. I think I'll redo that and
Okay.
try to map things out a little bit more so that we begin a meeting with throwing that up and saying, okay, is this still consistent with
Okay.
what we're working on? Because I do feel like it's a little bit
I'm
of a
just
pinball.
refuse to let go of OSRD cluster. We're gonna get that done.
Okay.
All right. On to inclusionary. Greg, do you maybe
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, why don't you highlight
Sure.
the
Yeah.
problems that you've been seeing with it?
So I think this has kind of prompted, we've had an ongoing discussion as we've interacted with applicants. There are things about the ordinance that even at the time of adoption, there were concerns raised. And also, I think this is a little bit highlighted. There's some recent discussion of a counselor or two that were thinking about the thresholds that we have in the ordinance as well. So that kind of prompted, well, why don't we kind of look at all of the potential issues associated with the ordinance that might, need some tweaking. And, that's what happens. You put something out there, you see how it's been functioning, what the feedback has been, and, kind of make adjustment if you feel like it, could advance the purpose of the ordinance. So one thing in particular was whether or not the threshold could be reduced. We hear all the time that people are concerned about, we're seeing a lot of mostly market rate housing being developed, and it doesn't do anything to contribute to our affordable housing needs. At the time of
you mean the 6 unit threshold, right?
Yes, that there's plenty of development that's happening in the multifamily sphere, sphere, 4-family, 3-family, and it doesn't contribute. This is a theme that came up in the 3A discussion. People saying you're taking a 3-family approach, which on the one hand seems fairly innocuous. There's many of them. They don't have a huge impact in areas, but yet that doesn't contribute in any way to affordable housing. That their market rate units are going to be developed, and that's all that's going to do. And there's also the potential to actually lose affordability through conversions if people are investing in these properties. So one of the things that we had RKG do, which was a requirement of our 3A submission, is they had to do an economic feasibility analysis to determine whether for those projects that would meet the threshold of our inclusionary ordinance, whether we will be allowed to impose a 15% requirement. Because as you remember, the guidelines said you can only have 10% of affordability requirement in these districts unless you can prove through a very specific, formulaic exercise that your inclusionary ordinance would not create an economic constraint on development of housing. So we were successful in doing that, and that's why our ordinance, our multifamily overlay district ordinance, allows for 15% of threshold projects to provide affordable housing. But we also asked them to look at it going down a little bit further to the actual 3-family level as well, for either creation of a unit or with the option to elect, not a requirement, to make an in lieu payment. We set that payment at for testing the model at $25,000, and that penciled out that would not be a barrier to the creation of a 3-family to contribute. I'm just going to park that there for a second. What prompted kind of bring this back was the question of whether or not we could reduce the threshold from 6 units down to 4 units. So my opinion is, the way that we have an in lieu payment structured right now, the value that somebody would have to contribute for a 4-family at that level is very high. It's currently, and as you recall, the way that it's calculated in the ordinance, it's a 3-year running average of sales, and it's the median value over that 3-year period. And currently it's at around $550,000. And when we had the discussion putting this ordinance that is in place right now, we started out with 180,000. Then we said, well, there were other models out there of tying it to an index, which at the time was sales prices. Some ordinances are super specific and break it down to a neighborhood and look at the sales prices in the neighborhood. We went with something more general that would incorporate all sales, and it has escalated quite a bit since we adopted the ordinance. So it started out around, I think, $420,000, and lo and behold, over 5 years, it's gone up quite a bit. But there was also the discussion of potentially scaling things. And I can hear Sean's voice like it was yesterday. He said, well, if they're not going to produce the unit, it shouldn't be easy. You know, they should make a contribution that's meaningful. And we had some discussion about what can you do with, you know, $180,000 doesn't get you the construction of a new unit. It's not 100% construction. So what can we tie this to? So there were other suggestions. I think also there were some discussions at the Affordable Housing Trust of doing that scaling, so that a 6-unit project wouldn't make a same contribution as a 9-unit, because there's the ability to kind of absorb that, spread it out over the more units you have. So that's a 2-part question, whether it seems reasonable to have more projects contributing most likely dollars, because you know, a 3-unit, a 4-unit project, 5-unit project may not want to provide an affordable unit. We all know what the 80% median rental rates are like. It's not a huge difference, but there's an encumbrance on the property. There's administration for tenanting, for that first tenant up, producing a fair housing marketing plan. So it's more than just the difference between a monthly rent to have an affordable unit. So if it were steering towards capturing more in lieu payments, you know, that's one question of, does it make sense to go down from 6 units to something lower? A suggestion was 4 units. We have economic data that shows you what we could do down to 3 units. So that's kind of like question number 1 that was prompted, was the threshold. If we wanted to actually look at a scaling, I have a slide which I can share, which is a little bit based on the economic feasibility analysis, and I can share that as well for a discussion at the next meeting or next time we discuss this. Let me just pull this up. And everybody can see that okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I put this hard bar here, this blue bar down at the bottom, just because what prompted this whole discussion was moving a threshold down to 4. So current payment, again, is only available for projects between 6 and 9 units. They make the same payment, and that's that $550,000. So what I basically did was just take the number of increments and evenly distribute the percentage of that value. Because eventually, if you're going to make a modification, we don't want to have a table where we have an index. So we would have a table of the percentage of that median sales value that you would have to contribute, if that makes sense to folks. So basically, each one of these numbers is 15% less than the value that's determined. So this is 85%, this is 70%, and so on, down to 4 units, which is at about 15% of that median value. And then I threw in the 25 just for discussion purposes. So this is something, you know, that would, again, create some equity between projects, so that the threshold project is not paying the same amount as something that has 3 more units. Does everyone understand that? Have any questions?
Yeah, you know, the huge obvious thing that jumps out at me is that the way we have it now, you'd be incentivized to build 5 units so that you didn't have to do this. And
Right.
so this makes a lot more sense to me. If it's bearable by developers, I have no.
I mean,
way.
anybody with a requirement for anything less than 9 units and greater than 6 would say, yes, please make this change. Because it creates an option that is just going to be less of a cost burden.
Yeah.
And then the other question is, do you include or increase that kind of capture by lowering the threshold to smaller projects? The 3-family one, again, is for demonstration purposes. I'm very careful about bringing up a 3-family just because if we make this change, we will have to go back to the state for review under our MFOD.
Ouch.
So it's one of those Pandora's boxes that I'm not sure I want to open. And again, I think there are costs and real development costs associated with that potential conversion. That again, it would be another cost to that 3-family that's allowed at this point. So it's just showing you what it was that was modeled, and then otherwise the question was, would you lower the threshold to 4? If you were going to do that, would you also consider scaling so that, again, the burden of saying to a 4-unit project, hey, you have to produce an affordable unit, whether it's condominium or rental, is also pretty high.
Beverly, were you trying to say something?
Sorry, having trouble.
There we go.
One of the advantages of this plan is, let's just look at the 5 level of, is it 220?
Yep.
220,000 is probably not going to build a comparable unit to the one that is in the 5-plex, right? I mean, the 5-plex may be 5 2-bedroom apartments, right? But if the $220,000 goes into a housing fund where it's mingled with all sorts of other grants and so on, it's a lot of money toward helping to make a project go. So I think this is really a great alternative. Otherwise, I see developers developing 5 and not 6, so they can avoid having to. And I have a feeling that this inclusionary is probably more generous than almost any other city in the region. I may be wrong about that, but this is a pretty tough proposal in terms of making developers contribute to the housing fund.
Greg, how has this goes to the Affordable Housing Trust. How have they been doing with that money? What have they been doing?
So they haven't had a lot of contribution. So most of the units, we've either had units created under the inclusionary ordinance. Again, there's not a ton of them. Most of our affordable housing has been created through the 40B process over the last 5 years. And will continue to do so. There's an application that we'll probably discuss briefly on probably the meeting of the 7th. There's a project proposal 256 Main Street by Harbor Light Homes on a property that they have they acquired, or are they still in acquisition? Maybe P&S from the Housing Authority. So there's a vacant parking area right now that they have a proposal for, and that has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals for a senior affordable housing project. So I mean, this is kind of why they also have had a similar discussion. I could also bring this back to them just for their input on this as well. Is they don't have a lot of revenue streams to support affordable housing. They were allocated ARPA funding to support projects, and otherwise there's been a policy decision to funnel the funds that come from the short-term rental tax from basically the city's share that comes from the state's collection of tax on short-term rentals has been funneled to them as well. Again, it's on the order of 100,000 plus a year. At this point, I think it started out in year one at like $65,000 or $69,000. So that was kind of one of their things of saying, we're having all this market rate development, which is natural. There's nothing wrong with market rate development. But is there, if we have this inclusionary provision, is there something we should be doing to make sure that it's not resulting in sub-threshold projects or maybe projects that are not moving forward? I mean, if someone may have looked at a 6-unit project and said, $550,000, no way, I can't do it. So is there some adjustment that could be made that would basically say, if you're doing multifamily, you're going to contribute in some way, and doing it at a way that's a little bit more equitable to the size of the project.
Hey, Greg, can I ask you a question? Just, I want to make sure I understood. On the Harbor Light project on Main Street, all those units are going to be affordable units. So would they
Yes.
still have to make a contribution?
No.
Right. Okay.
No. Yeah. So you don't have to make a contribution unless you're not providing the number of units that at 15% of the units. You're doing 100% of the units.
All right.
You're
I just wanted
complying
that.
anyway. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Okay.
But if Harbor Light is putting several sources together to make a project go, and there is $300,000 or $500,000 in this fund that can be applied to that, it may help them pull a project over.
Yes, and they were actually allocated ARPA funding. So the Affordable Housing Trust selected that project as a candidate project to support, and so they did receive funds from them. That was, Housing Trust being backed by ARPA, but in the future, if there were a project like this, those are the types of projects that they would be supporting with revenue that's coming from in lieu payments.
Okay. Sean, do you have any thoughts?
I like it. Sounds good to me. I do think it makes sense. I mean, I think when we were crafting the ordinance originally, there wasn't that thought, as Greg said, that if you don't want to put it on site, then you should pay for it. But I think I do see that the concern about impacting development of anything above the threshold, particularly right in the 6, 7 units, 8 units even, you might just not do it. So actually having the sliding scale makes a lot of sense to me. The idea of going back to the state to include 3 families is a little scary, but to Beverly's point, a bunch of $25,000 contributions would be meaningful. So I could go either way, keep it at 4, or at least submit the application to the state to see if we can do it. And going through a process right now out in California, trying to work on a home for my 2 sisters to live in, converting it to a 2-family. $25,000 is sort of not much in the grand scheme of things these days when constructing.
Sad for you.
And Greg, obviously this would change as the 3-year numbers change each year.
Yes.
You're looking at
Yep. So the
average,
assessors
right?
calculated every year in January. They basically add the next year's sales drop off the year before that and run that median.
Okay.
Beverly has a question.
I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is why the ADU is not a separate piece, because by definition, an ADU is an affordable unit by virtue of the fact that we limit it to size. Is it 800 or 1,000 square feet?
900.
900.
900, close.
50% or 900, whichever's less.
Okay, but the point being is often they're smaller than that. And by definition, they're either built into existing infrastructure, which makes them cheaper because you already have a foundation and blah, blah, blah. Or even if they're new, because you put a separate unit in the backyard or something. By definition, they're going to come in as a rental, probably, and they're going to be at a lower rate just because they're smaller. So we really want to facilitate ADUs, and if the state allows ADUs that meet certain criteria to be granted by right, that is another way of encouraging affordable housing.
So Greg, remind
I
me
have a
what this,
question. Can I-
oh, go ahead,
um,
Steve. Yeah.
I would just, I mean, the numbers look really interesting, and I guess I would like to see the calculation by which you write.
That's what I was just gonna
understand,
say.
I understand the model and the motivation for those tiers and so on, but I guess I kind of like to see it in terms of a developer's decision on whether to do it in lieu of, or how that might influence their decision to build X number of units or not. And what the assumptions around that, like it's based on an assumption that a given unit will sell for X amount on the average or median.
Actually, that wasn't what I was gonna say.
Okay.
That's more complex than what I was gonna say. So 550. So the cost to build a unit is somewhere around 550, right? Or a little less. So that nine unit person may or may not do a unit or contribute the money. But as you go lower, clearly it's just going to be the money.
So I guess what might be helpful, Steve, and I'll do this before we discuss this again, because again, it's like I'm not asking you everybody to go, yeah, let's do it. So I'm just responding to, okay, there needs to be some discussion about this. But I think what will be helpful is I'll share the EFA from the 3A exercise, which shows a bunch of different tiers of projects. It doesn't run the 3 up to 9. It was, we said in our submission, we're going to do, our inclusionary ordinance has a threshold of 6. We require 15%. So there's basically a pro forma that's been developed based on, RKG's ability at the time, at that moment in time, getting all the construction data, getting all the, the permitting, getting everything to look at construction and operation over a 10-year period, and does it pencil out and shows what that impact would be of, I believe, I'm trying to remember if it's on a rental basis or on a sales basis, but that'll give you a little bit of a sense of like, what does this mean? Because you'll at least see, I think you'll see an example of a 3 and a 6. And then from there, this is an adjustment. That 6, for instance, will have basically an easier time if they want to make a contribution. And it'll give you a little bit of that, what does that decision-making process look like?
Good. Yeah, that's exactly what I was after. Sort of the details of the builder's motivation, when presented with this.
Yeah. And again, I think this also, I'm trying to remember, I'd have to look back, but when this was discussed at the Housing Trust, probably a good year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, what the perspective was at that time as well. And I don't know if my approach, again, just kind of classing and taking that value and spreading it across the threshold into an equal increment, because again, at some point we need to have something defensible that we can point to. It's easy calculation, but that's the approach that I took, and I've seen scaling in other communities. There are, we worked with a consultant when we developed the ordinance in 20. I'll be Sean. How long ago was that? Was it 5
I was
years?
there.
We started.
Was it 5 years ago?
6 maybe.
That's it.
And there were all different approaches. Some of them just had a number, And that, to me, I think everybody in the room was like, well, who's going to pick that number and why that number? And does there need to be any, kind of adjustment for the few, you say $180,000 and then 10 years later you go, we're only charging $180,000. Well, why didn't we ever? So to have an index is a good one. And it did seem like sales made sense, because if things start to plummet, it's going to be that much harder for an affordable project to make a contribution or have a unit included. But they really run the gamut. Different communities have picked different indices with a lower starting point. Some communities have up to 17.5%
Oh, I remember.
affordability
Yeah.
requirements. And they also tier it and say you have to produce so many at 50, so many at 60. And again, these are markets that are,
And-
they're people are knocking down the doors to build.
And
in
remember,
those communities.
we struggled so hard with whether we were gonna go with, the cost of housing or the market rate
Right.
for housing, and,
Yeah, and the old ordinance was basically, it was not getting much. So
right.
even though we weren't getting a lot of contributions, it wasn't gonna amount to very.
Mhm.
So that was part of the discussion was, well, again, if we're, the goal is, that was, again, Sean's statement, called the inclusionary housing ordinance. It's not called the in lieu payment ordinance. So it should be an option, and if it's an option, there should be a cost. Because we're
Yes.
not in real time, we're getting 6 market rate units and we're having no on the ground in that moment production of affordable housing.
So how many 6 to 9, might be too detailed a question, but how many 6 to 9 unit developments have there been since this ordinance, and what did people do?
I'd have to take a look at that, because so they all would typically require city council special permitting.
Yeah.
So there haven't been a ton. Again, there's
mean-
been no contribution.
Right, so they
So
if
they're- so
they
they've-
built a unit.
They've built the unit. Yeah. So I mean, again, that's
Or
an
they've
argument
gone-
to be said that maybe that is not attractive.
Yeah.
For
Or-
to make a payment.
We don't know, maybe they chose to build 5 on purpose.
Or they chose.
Yeah. Yeah, well, can you share that chart with us? And when you do,
Yep.
before you do, can you add the percentages?
I was gonna do that.
As
Yeah,
another column.
I was
Thank
gonna
you.
do that. Yeah. And then I was like, well, that's just complicated. It's not that hard.
No, it's not
50
complicated.
But I will put that over there. And again, the 25 is just, it was a
Yep.
number that was chosen to kind of test the model.
Yep, and it sounds like that was the number
And
that
that's
came
what- and
came
that's what
out of the
was run.
EFA, right?
Yes, yeah. And it kind of falls in line. It's at about 5%. So you're not going to 0. for,
Right,
or unless you are, in which case you wouldn't lower the threshold. But if you did want to bring in 3 family and some contribution, it's about 5% of that value. So that's the other thing to be thinking about too, whether you would have an index, because again, this could go up, but everything would be going up. But that's another thing, again, the Pandora's box, want to open that or not, or would you make it fixed and have that? So we're in this issue where if we make a change in 511, whether something is permitted by right or by special permit, they would have to comply. But if that, for instance, there have to be comfort with, from the state's perspective, of having something that's indexed. We modeled it at 25. So would you put it just in the ordinance that a 3 family is 25, and then at the point you revisit it in the future and you'd have to change the ordinance? I don't know. It's kind of
well,
like one of those
couldn't
things.
we could find out what percentage of the 3-year median 25
Well,
is.
It is 5. It's about 5%.
So that's.
But what I'm saying is, from the state's perspective, it's an index. And
Oh, it's a different index?
no. We've created an index
Yeah,
to
right.
to our thing that will change. And it's just a matter of, we would have to explain,
To
that
the
this is
state.
changing. And so that's where I'm just like, do we even want to go down to that level? Or can we just keep that behind us?
Or treat it separately also.
Or treat it separately at some point?
At the very least, if we're gonna do it, let's treat it separately.
Yeah.
Okay, and what about 10 and up? That's working? That's working.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think that's where we've had that discussion in the past. And this ordinance, there are things that have changed when we did this 6 years ago and prior to. The threshold went from 11 units to 8 units to 6 units. So we've changed that over time. There's never been an in lieu payment. So for 11 unit projects, for 8 units and above, as they've been created over the last 15 years, they've all created a unit.
Okay, so this
so-
is it. Yeah, this is a
So if we
dumb.
want to keep that hard line of saying we're only going to take contributions for smaller projects, and then
Yeah,
above that, if you're a 10 unit project, you should be able to
Right.
build an affordable.
yeah.
Would we want to also have data for the number of smaller developments that have been developed where they haven't been affected by these thresholds? So like if some imagine or
Like
somehow
the
or
three-
imaginarily retroactive, who would have been affected down to 4 units, let's say.
Yeah, we could look at that. I can get permitting data from the city council or through the building permit process. Probably easier to get the special permitting data. Because we haven't seen a ton. So I mean that's the other thing, like which will also produce at some point, again, more data. We have data from a 5-year period, and it hasn't been updated for a couple of years, but generally 50 to 60 units a year, most of it is in 1 and 2 family. It's not like there's, dozens of multifamily projects every year. There's a handful, and very often they're, a unit here, a unit there. The recent examples would be 116 East Main Street, 8-unit project, 11 units on the back shore. Is that right? Trying to remember the development on Atlantic, which also had some as of right development as well in 2-family and single family form. And then the bigger projects that we've seen have been 40B projects that have been 100%.
Yeah.
So, but we could try
that's
to paint that picture a little bit better, just in terms of what you would be capturing. And again,
Yes.
so
not
far
only
there
what
hasn't been a
we'd be
refirm.
capturing and then its positive impact, but also to the extent you can do it, kind of an A/B test. Is this hindering development in those ranges once it's enacted?
Right.
We'd want to know that. I mean, of course, there's lots of other factors, but yeah.
Yep.
Off the top of my head, the only thing that has come through since we made that last change that would have been affected by this is the basically the re-permitting of the existing units on Main Street, right? So I think a unpermitted 7-unit structure that was being sold. They came in to get the proper permits in place. And there was the debate at the city council as to whether if you're already existing,
Right.
does it trigger or not trigger? And I think the council voted not to even decide on that. They just gave them the permit because they were existing, and it would have involved a lot of messy back end stuff.
And that since has been modified so that it's clear in terms of it's resulting in.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think anything else. I mean, I can't think off the top of my head, I can't think of any other project that has come through since this was enacted in.
Yeah, there's only been some very, very recent activity.
There's been like
Ambet
Prospect
building.
Street, yeah.
Yeah. So there's been
then
a couple
Waynesville.
that would And some of them are 4 or 5, that would have been, triggered by this.
In Lanesville, what were you gonna say, Eric?
There's a
That
4 family in
church,
there. Yeah.
but that's
Oh, right.
4, so it's not hitting the threshold, so.
Yeah,
Forgot about that.
that's a compound, jeez. Yeah, go ahead, Bethany.
I just saw that, remember the 40B project that's sort of behind the existing businesses on Maplewood? You can see it though from the gap between Shaw's and Maplewood. It's what, a 30 unit, a 40B?
Yep.
And they called it employment housing, so it's sort of
Workforce housing.
workforce housing, but with three bedroom units or something. It must meet 40B requirements, and they're pretty far along. I was really surprised. I don't know, I haven't seen it before because I travel up
Modular
and down.
construction. It literally happened over a couple of weeks.
Isn't it interesting? All of a sudden,
Yeah.
I mean, I travel those streets all the time. All of
Yeah.
a sudden it's there, and it must
Yeah.
be the 40B, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's good news.
Yeah.
Well, that's 30 more units, and they're all by definition lower income because they're essentially efficiencies, right?
Yeah, they're
very
definitely pretty
small.
small units.
Yeah.
I'm not sure everyone, I think it's good too, but there's been mixed reaction to it.
It's a weird.
Yeah,
But because it's a 40B, that's a bypass, right?
yeah.
And the bypass was put in because locals don't like to see that density of development, right?
But that's not well understood, unfortunately.
Well,
Um,
the issue.
okay. So next steps, we probably want to think about this. We want to get the EFA and think about the numbers that Greg's presented us with, and then get Suzanne in to talk about this. And when did you say that might be?
I think we could probably target like the 7th,
That's August 7th?
August 7th. Yep.
Okay. So let's think about it between now and August 7th and have Suzanne come and talk to us about the other part. But mostly I think that's great. And she can help us write that in too, right?
Yeah. So, and I would think about, give you more information, because like Steve, like after you see things, if you think you want to adjust scale, again, that's an approach. I mean, I think for right now we do index our sales, which I think, that's something that makes it local. But whatever, you could start at a lower percentage and make that in lieu payment less, or scale it back up, any way you want. Think long and hard about whether you want to go down to 3. Again, the prompt and suggestion was to move it from 6 to 4. So, and I don't know that there wasn't really any thought in particular about the in lieu payment schedule. It was just, let's try to require more inclusion by lowering it to 4. My thought is, again, because there's been enough discussion about this, if you're going to push it down, you might want to provide an option, because again, it may do it, maybe taking out a sector of projects that are actually happening that would just not happen, because they're not going to make that payment, and they're not going to have an affordable unit. So it just kind of stymies that small multifamily development. So again, it could be leave it at 4, create the scale, and then we could talk about those some other pieces of the ordinance later.
Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, just one point that's probably obvious about the lowering it to 3 is of course, it's now intersecting with the 3A, the core of the 3A possibilities. And we've recognized that there's this sprinkler requirement. So that just would add an extra onus on that particular.
That's also one of my hesitations. Is another added cost, and then again, we either have to come up with something fixed or justify an index and build that case and basically have to have the AG's office review it again. So there's that. And
Yeah.
HLC.
Not only
Yeah.
that, but the three-plex business was a victory. It was a costly victory because of the referendum. To do this on top of it is like, to our opponents, it's like a red flag. I think I would leave the three as it is and then just look at 4 or 5. I just think politically it's a better option.
Or it's something we take up in a year or
Well, even then,
Well, I also let it, see what's happening.
see
I
how,
mean,
see if
we have-
there's really any permits. Yeah.
yeah,
yeah.
we haven't had any thus far.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we didn't add anything more to the agenda because we thought this conversation would be longer because we thought Suzanne would be here. So, I think that's it for today, and we get a 25-minute break until our next meeting.
And so do you want to keep a meeting on for next Thursday?
Yes, can we pursue
Well-
cluster OSRD?
And I'll provide an update to that. And then, for the next couple of weeks, you'll have information to formulate questions about. I'll kind of put it all into the folders in terms of information about inclusionary with the EFA data and any other building permit data that we have. Can create a separate box for if you want to split the discussion, you just want to start looking at the nonconformity stuff, tell me when you want your mind to go, oh God.
I'm
It's
gonna,
very, very detailed.
yeah,
And it's
but
interesting.
can AI help us with that?
I mean, it's all very well summarized tabular data
Okay,
by every district and looking at all the dimensions and all the structures and how they fit on the lot and all that kind of stuff. So
wow,
it's
okay,
pretty detailed.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, great, just
Okay.
let us know.
Okay. So, and just from the group that's here, who thinks they'll be here for the next 2 Thursdays? 1, 2.
Sean will be here.
Guys around.
I can't,
One,
can't do next Thursday, but the one after that possibly.
And I think David said not next Thursday, right?
Correct.
But the
Okay,
one,
so
but yet,
next
yet,
Thursday,
Be there.
next Thursday will be a subcommittee meeting.
yes,
We'll
Only,
just,
and can it
Yeah.
be on
Just have-
Zoom? Because I can join by Zoom on the 25th.
Yep. we could do that.
But I can be in
Um,
person on the 31st.
Okay.
wait, why does it have to be in Zoom on the 25th? Sorry.
It doesn't have to be. I mean, we can.
It's
we
actually
can-
the 24th, I think.
Yeah, are
24th.
you,
We can have Beverly Zoom in.
Zoom,
Oh.
because I'm
Okay.
physically not,
okay,
I think I'm not going to be here.
So if
Is there a
Sean
meeting on the
and
28th?
No,
no,
the
or
28th,
24th, you mean?
No, no. Is there a I'm sorry, I'm looking at I'm looking,
There's
Oh,
July
sorry.
24th,
and
yep,
31st.
subcommittee only. Oh,
Yep.
yeah, and 31st.
31st. Okay, and then the next planning board meeting is the 7th. The formal.
Right.
plan. Yep, okay.
So for the
actually,
31st, what will happen? Will we be a subcommittee or the board?
So,
I can attend by Zoom on the 31st.
me too. At the 25th, I'm here. It's the
24th.
31st, it's by Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And
then,
Steve, where are you in this mix? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, can't be there on the 24th.
Okay.
And then I don't have anything on my calendar right now for the 31st.
Okay.
What is that? Is
We're
that
just
just the
trying to
planning
do-
board?
subcommittee.
no, we're
Or
trying to
the-
do subcommittee meetings every Thursday
Gotcha.
from 3 to 5-ish.
Yeah.
Or 3:30,
And-
whatever. I mean,
3:30 on planning board meeting days. And
oh,
the problem is that when there's more than 3 of us, we have to notice it as a planning board meeting,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
it's still a subcommittee topic meeting.
Right.
like today.
You know,
So-
maybe I'll do a doodle. So we have it in one place and
That
people
sounds
can say,
great.
yes, I'm
Yeah.
available, yes, I'm available, and then we'll know how
Okay,
to notice.
Good
okay.
idea.
Okay,
So we need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Sean,
Second.
second by Steve. Was that
roll
Steve?
call,
Yep.
member Renfro,
Yes.
member Bookin,
Yes.
member Henry,
Yes.
member Rosen,
Yes.
and member Yost.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay,
see you in 20
20
minutes.
minutes. Enjoy
you.
your snack.
Thank you.
Bye.